Oh, not sure how many people we're gonna have on the call today, so we can get started whenever. Um,
Hey, Rich.
hey, who was that? James.
Yeah, it's
James,
me. Yep, James.
can't see your face today, or what? You got the
I'm
kids or
trying to
something?
plug it in. I'm plugging it in right now. I tried turning on. It said no camera. I'm like, what are you talking? Oh, I unplugged it. So,
That happened to me yesterday, a couple days ago too. I didn't understand what was going on. I had to just restart Zoom.
oh my God, I was on a seller call, just like 2, 3 days ago, winter break, and I had both kids by myself because I'm that smart. I scheduled it. She's a nurse and she was at work,
Uh-huh.
and my son's underneath. So he's 15 months. My daughter's 2.5.
Uh-huh.
So like he's underneath pressing buttons. She's on the top trying to like grab cord. She unplugs the ding, unplugs the camera, then he restarts the computer, and then I'm like, I jump back. Oh, sorry, and then I plug it back in. I didn't know she unplugged the camera. So and then I don't know. It was all. I was just like, sorry, right,
It sounds like
right.
a similar story.
Merry
My
Christmas.
my uh my ex now, but she's a nurse. And during COVID, I had my idiot kids with me, and because she would work during the day and I was working from home anyway. And these two, but now they're now 15 and 14, so they're high school kids. But back then, they were middle school kids, and I was in the middle of a number of meetings, and they thought it would be funny to just kind of like walk in front of the camera with no clothes on, and
It's
so I spent that whole COVID time just yelling at them, quit, you quit interrupting me during meetings. And they would just like literally like, they were supposed to be in school, online school, but they'd
yeah.
get up in the middle of class and walk out with no shirts on and be flexing in the background. And I wouldn't even notice it because sometimes I didn't have my camera on, but sometimes no, I have my camera on, but for some reason, like I'd have a presentation up and I couldn't really see myself, and it was on Google or whatever. And so they
Mhm.
were in the back, they'd be in the background like flexing, and people could see, and people thought it was funny, but I just annoying.
I
And
remember that during COVID with other people where we'd be on Zoom calls or whatever, and like, you'd have those people where they'd be, super serious. They got their awesome Zoom background, right? And then all of a sudden their kid just kind of like appear. They don't see them. They see
yeah,
their kid appears in the background, starts like making faces, then disappears, right?
yeah,
They don't
yeah,
even know what everybody's laughing at, right? Oh, so funny. Everybody was. I
yeah,
mean, the world revolved around Zoom then. Jeez, just a
yeah.
work.
On the one-on-one call, I'll have to tell you about the funniest thing I ever saw. I don't think it'd be appropriate on this call, but yeah, it's when people were first getting used to using Zoom and what have you, and people's wives were sending like personal. We'll just say this: she's one of the guys I work with, not at Acquira, but another one of my firms. His wife sent him like a very personal photograph, and somehow he was supposed to be showing. He had a presentation that he was supposed to be showing the rest of us, but somehow he put up this photograph of his wife, and
Oh,
she was bearing it all.
oh
And the
no.
funny thing about it was the three other guys on the call, none of us said anything. We just kind of sat there and just, I guess, looked at the picture. I don't know, but no one said anything until finally he realized what he had done, and he was completely embarrassed. Face was,
Oh no. He probably thought it was on a different monitor or
yeah,
something.
exactly, exactly,
I don't know how to work
exactly.
this. He thought he was capturing a different screen or he doesn't really know the difference.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly. All right, so I wanted to have. I know we will probably have some people pop in and out in this vacation week, so I wasn't expecting a big crowd, which is why I wanted to put off next week's topic and meeting, or the one that I had originally planned for this week till next week, when more people are back. But I wanted to use this time to kind of just connect with you guys and see if there's, anything you guys want to specifically talk about. We don't have to spend the whole hour on the call. If there's something that you're looking at, you want to go over, or something you don't understand, we can talk about it, or you have some general questions about kind of what we're doing at Acquira, we can talk about all that. I'm going to let you guys kind of lead this. Again, we don't have to stay on because, oh, great time you joined, Nick. Um, we don't have to stay on for the full hour. If you guys don't have anything, I'm very happy to release you into
I'm
the
gonna
New Year's Day weekend.
I'm gonna come
So,
out with the hard hitting question.
all right.
Um, So this is something I ran into with a partial buy-in deal. And they kind of hit me off. Well, it caught me off guard. It didn't really make sense. So the deal was there's two owners, okay? They're 39 and 40, young, right? They don't want to do anything. They don't want to go do anything else. They're like, yeah, we'll stay, right? We want to stay.
Mhm.
So I was like, okay, they can both roll 10%, right? I'll buy 80%. And then they're the broker, right? They were saying that essentially the equity that they're rolling should have conversion rights. So similar to like a typical investor who would invest 10% or something. So like let's say Acquira, when you guys buy in, you
Mhm.
get conversion rights. So they were saying that their equity roll should have conversion rights, right?
Conversion to what? They're
Like
already
a
in
step up,
80%.
like a step up, right? So once, once it a step up is not a conversion rate. I guess I'm saying the wrong word, a step up. So they were expecting their 10% to have a step up after the SBA. And I was just like, well, hold on a second. They're cashing out, right? It's not like an investor coming in, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it didn't make any sense, but they made it seem like this is how it goes, right? Like
No,
it's
they're
you
trying to get
treat
a
it as if you treat it as if it's an investor investing into the
no,
business, right?
not
So they're
unless they're
crazy.
yeah, not unless they were investing in a with a different structure in terms of like the security that they're using. Like I mean, yeah, if they were gonna let's just say you buy essentially you'd have to buy them out completely and then allow them to reinvest under like with a different share structure, like maybe a preferred structure that would have some sort of conversion rights. What it seems like to me they're trying to get is some sort of like in real estate there's what's called a promote. Like so if you've got a general partner who's running and developing a project and he's got outside investors that have supplied the majority of the capital, then the way the general partner gets paid over and above his small amount of equity for the work that he's put in is to give him a larger piece of the cash flow once the development meets certain performance hurdles in terms of the returns to those investors. Once you meet that minimum performance hurdle, maybe there's another hurdle that if you get to an ROI of such and such, then the general partner gets a bigger piece of that, just for all because of all the work that they've done to get it to that hurdle. That I understand from a promote standpoint, but they're not going to get that from the standpoint of you buying out their equity, leaving them 10% in the business. They should be on the same terms as you at that point in terms of the equity, because they have a chance to make even more the way the business performs anyway. They're not going to get a additional ownership share just because they sold you their 80%, and then all of a sudden they're going to expect, well, no, now we want 10% each in addition to that once the
Right.
SBA is paid off. No, no, that doesn't work like that.
That's what I said. And I told them that wouldn't even, I told them basically that the SBA, because I was using SBA, right? I was like, and this is a benchmark deal. I'm sure you're familiar with
Yeah,
benchmark.
yeah.
I cannot stand benchmark. I swear I cannot stand benchmark, but it's like I've got the only three, I'm working three different deals right now. They're all benchmark. Everything else is like, I got nothing. They're just so slow, and it's like, but so okay. I told them that it wouldn't work, right? I was like,
No.
the SBA is not going to. For one, they have to stay under 20%, right?
Yep.
So unless for some way they wanted to roll 5%, and then maybe we do I don't know, you know what I mean? But it didn't make any sense. And then I saw something else on Twitter. So there's a guy on Twitter who was saying that if a seller rolls 10%, right, he would get 50% ownership in the business because it's the same amount. Since you both would be injecting the same amount of equity, you would be 50-50 partners technically in the business. And I'm like, yeah,
No.
maybe if he personally guarantees the business too, which he's not going to
Exactly.
do. And then he, was just like, I understand from an economic standpoint, maybe somehow you get there, but realistically, that doesn't make any sense. He has his liquidity event, right? And so
Exactly.
what I ended up doing with the other deals, I just resent them a new offer for 100%. I was like, okay, this is too confusing for everybody involved, right? I was just like, here's for 100%, let me know if that is a
No.
of interest,
And I mean, and for them, really, as 10% owners each in the business, they should understand that there's incentive for them. If the business does well, they're going to get paid more anyway. Or you could structure it to where they would get like some sort of a bonus payment or something like that, but not an increase in ownership at that point. I mean, it's just unless
Right.
you want to issue them performance-based shares after the SBA is paid off. But while the SBA is in the picture, if like you said, if you issue shares above that gets them over and above that 20% range, then there's some other issues they're gonna have to deal with as far as guaranteeing the loan from that standpoint. Now, if that happens after the deal closes, I mean, is the SBA lender going to come back and look at kind of the change in ownership structure?
Would they even let
Probably.
you? Would they even let you change it like while the
They
SBA is in
probably
the?
no, they wouldn't. That's a good point.
Yeah.
They probably have in the docs that any change in ownership has to be approved by the SBA lender. Um, so that's a good point. It probably wouldn't happen, and I'm sure they wouldn't approve it. And if they did approve it, that's when they would ask for the guarantee.
Yeah, their concern was mainly the all the debt being on the business. So like they're like, okay, great, we're gonna have 10%. This business is gonna be, it's gonna have a ton of debt now. What is our 10% even going to? I mean, granted, they were gonna be collecting a $200,000 salary each, right?
Yeah,
Plus, whatever's left, right? They would get whatever's, you know what I mean? In it, but hey, whatever. So
yeah,
we'll see how that one goes.
yeah.
That
That's a
was
little
my
different.
question. I think Kelly might have a question.
All right, all right.
Well, I have two, but James, what is Benchmark?
They are a
Brokerage,
brokerage firm, so they're
brokerage.
like an M&A firm, and they don't put a price on
Oh,
any of
okay.
their listings. So if you look up Benchmark International, they
Okay.
have a website, embracebenchmark.com.
Them
Um,
and Generational Equity are known for not putting prices on deals.
ever. And
Yeah.
then, and then if they don't,
Okay.
and you guarantee 4x minimum, right? Like basically
4x for
minimum.
a business doing a $50,000 a year.
Yeah, yeah. If
SBA.
it's over a million, they want 8x.
Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Okay. I have a question. So I've been Acquisition Plus for about a month now, and all this is new to me, but I'm curious about licensing and how that's typically handled. Um, because we had the guy on the call who was like, well, it's going to take years to get the architecture license or the general contractor license. I'm like, do people normally do that as owners, or are they like protecting themselves with employees who have licenses in the business?
Yeah. So each deal is a little bit different, depending on what the business has in terms of licensure, in terms of the employees that are licensed versus the owner. So, a lot depends on you can from a financing standpoint, as long as you have a licensing transition plan in place, you should be okay. But typically how you're going to handle this, and actually we have a couple of AEs that are closing out businesses right now where that is or is not an issue, or we found ways around that. Noah, they are a bad brokerage firm. Yes, Noah, they are. So typically how we handle it is first of all, you got to understand who has what licenses in the business. Obviously, if it's a business that's small enough and it's just the owner with the primary license in the business, then there's a couple different ways you can handle that. It's become a little bit easier under SBA rules now than it was even a year and a half ago, even. Um, but typically, you're going to want if the owner is the only license in the business, obviously you have some key person risk from that standpoint. So you have to decide whether you want to move forward with the acquisition, given that key person risk. And a lot may have to do with your belief in the seller's willingness to stick around for a year or two. So if it's a sole license in place, I would actually structure a deal so that we keep the seller around for at least a minimum of 2 years. You may not need them for that long, or him or her for that long, but generally, 2 years will give you kind of a chance to actually find either a replacement license holder or someone within the business who has the ability to test for the license. Now, you're still going to shift then the risk over to that one person being the sole license holder, and that's where you're going to look to really kind of mitigate that risk by hiring other license holders into the business eventually. So the idea is you want to have more than one person that can kind of hold you hostage from that standpoint. Now that's, for really like specialty licenses, think of electrical contractors, plumbing, HVAC. General contractor licenses are generally easier to get. So I would say the way you handle that as a owner or the buyer of the business is, I would personally actually test for it, because a lot of times with general contractor licenses, you just need either some level of education or classroom instruction. There's usually no, apprenticeship required or anything like that. So it's pretty easy to get one as an owner. I would get that, especially if you're going to be involved on the construction side of whatever business that you're dealing with. Um, but usually, sometimes you'll have a business that has more. You'd love to have a business that has more than one license in place. And then from that standpoint, if you've got another employee that has a license, then that's where you want to provide like an incentive plan for that person to stay. So either a long-term employment contract, offer them equity in the business, whatever you need to do to kind of keep that person in place. But there's, every situation is going to be a little bit different, but we'll find a way to kind of mitigate that risk through some sort of a licensing plan. And in some states, it's mostly, I think it's just California, but there's a couple states that are reciprocal to California. You can actually use an RMO agency, where you can basically, find an employee. Well, there's agencies that actually will like basically rent their employees out to you, that have qualified licenses. Now they'll have to sign off on projects or what have you, and you pay a monthly fee for that. But that's a way to go. But because California does it, and Arizona and Nevada are reciprocal, then you basically got 3 states. I don't know what other states use those types of agencies, but there's some out there that I think there's more like 1 or 2 others that allow you to do that. Now on your side, too, you can also do that on your own. I mean, if you can find a retired licensed person that is looking to, put their license to use for some extra money, you can hire that person basically for a set fee per month to come in you would have to hire them as an employee, but you can hire them to come in as your kind of like your qualifying person as well. Now they're going to have to, you want somebody who's got some experience if you don't have experience, because they're going to have to still sign off on projects or what have you, or on work, if it comes down to it. But there's a number of different ways to handle it.
What kind of liability is involved, like for the employee, that I need to think about? Like, obviously their expertise is going to be important, but in their experience. But what about, like, I don't know, business insurance, or are there other ways to like sort of think about that and mitigate the risk of somebody that I've just hired and it's not my area of expertise? Do they know what they're doing, kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably I don't know if there's, and this will be great for Hayden to be on the call about this, because I'm not an expert, but I'm sure there's trade professional like insurance.
I can speak to that, Rich.
Okay, speak to that, Jeffrey.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, you'll have a general liability policy. So I just went through this. We're a subcontractor, so it's a little different than a GC, but in general, you're going to have, the business will carry a general liability policy, and you as the owner would be the named insured person. And with no experience like me, it's going to cost more, a lot more probably, than an experienced contractor. You may not be insurable, but if you have a person that has even 1 share of your corporation, then that person, if they're qualified and licensed and they have the bond that's required, can help a lot for you to get the GL policy. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
So, and it'll cost less than, it could potentially be like really, really expensive if it was just me or just you. So that's what I've done in my case, is the seller kept a tiny fraction of equity for the purposes of helping continuity of the same kind of policy. They still re-underwrite the policy to add you as an owner. But at least they're, the company has something, 30 years experience. And so seller willing. And so in my case, the seller is also carrying the construction licenses and is on the liability policy, which saves a good bit of money. So there's cost I have to pay him for that, but it's probably cheaper overall.
Jeffrey, from my notes, it looks like you saved 20K by keeping the previous owner on there.
I mean, there's a lot of moving shells to that calculation.
But it gives an idea if it's worthwhile doing.
Yeah, there's a large range of prices in GL I've seen. I mean, I got a competitive quote from a different company, different agent, different company, and it was like $27,000 less. And I was really tempted to consider that, but given the risk of, them, like if they come in and question, oh, well, tell us more about your safety policy, like 2 months in, and it's if they know you, they're not as likely to do that. They still can do that, but I just decided to pay more and stick with the original policy.
Yeah.
But
Thanks,
how much
And
is
are you planning
hey,
to? I'm sorry.
sorry, just real quick, Jeffrey, when you said percentage, like a tiny fraction, is that like less than 1% or?
You'd have to speak to your agent. It's in my case, it's far less than 1%. And they
Okay.
said, even one single share, because he was a previous owner and the policy was in his name and he carried the license and the bond, they were okay with that. But that could be case by case. I don't know.
I would bet it is.
Yeah.
What are you gonna say, Kelly?
I was just gonna ask Jeffrey if you plan to like hire someone, like what's your approach to hiring and structuring the new, just like you were suggesting, Rich, like, what's your incentive plan when you hire new people to replace the owner or the seller rather?
Yeah, for the sake of the license, we have a guy who's like our operating partner, and he's an outside, he's not an employee, and I'm trying my best to recruit him and potentially have him invest.
Armando.
That's Armando.
Yeah.
Armando's awesome, man. He's really fun to hang out with. I was at his house. He's got 6 brothers eating like tacos and stuff in the backyard. So far so good. If I can get him on board to run things, he's amazing and he's really efficient. And then I've got a general manager, partner, part owner. I don't even know exactly how to work that out with the SBA loan either. But that's my idea.
You could do like
That's
phantom,
definitely plan A.
phantom stock until the SBA
Right.
is paid off,
Yeah.
something like that.
That's kind of what I was thinking, that or like a warrant type thing. I don't know, similar terms.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Just going along those lines, Jeffrey, you were saying about the ownership.
You can't ask
do
questions
something
without a
like-
camera. Okay, you can't ask questions without a camera, bro. No, I'm just
Okay,
kidding. I'm just kidding.
I'll get you. Okay, so could you do something like a profit sharing rather than equity or
Yeah.
partnership
Yeah.
for Armando? Yeah,
Sure.
something like
Yeah,
that could
I've
be
already
less
done that.
complicated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I gave him a letter, right before Christmas. That was a profit sharing thing. So he's got money coming one way or the other.
Okay.
And then
Yeah,
if I repitch him on being an owner, he could reinvest that money or add some money, or I'm kind of testing the waters. We're also thinking about starting another business that is like a GC, like development kind of company. So there's lots of possibilities.
Yeah, I always go in the order of offer the employee a higher salary. Then if that's not incentive enough, offer them profit sharing. Then if that's not incentive enough, offer them phantom stock. And then if that's not incentive enough and they're that valuable, then offer them real equity. That's kind of the order that I go.
Checks
Your
out.
order of
way.
expense, cheapest to most expensive.
Yep. So, all right. All right. Anyone else? But remember, you guys got us for a whole hour. And thanks, Jeffrey, for jumping on. Like I said, I could head out for lunch if you guys don't have anything. I just wanted to connect with you guys again, just to have something to do on Friday.
So to speak to the licensing part again, it is really dependent too on where, right?
Yeah.
Because like every state is different, right? And then again, like Rich said, for instance, I mean, like North Carolina has reciprocity with like 6 states or something, right? So it's like, you can get a license in North Carolina and you can use it in, I think like the neighboring whole area, right? So a lot of different states have different agreements between their licenses. You can roll, but as far as getting your own license, like Florida requires 4 years. But you only really, if you have like a degree, right? So let's say you have a 4-year degree, you only need 1 year of experience. And that experience quite literally starts as soon as you buy the business, right? You don't need experience doing it, right? Like physically in somebody's house, right? It's in the industry. It's industry experience, right? So if you own the business, guess what? You're in the industry, right? And then I think that's, I don't know, it's a phone number, 914 or something.
Okay.
And then you can sit for the license yourself for like HVAC, roofing, plumbing. They all require 4 years, either experience or education, any degree. But the education can only substitute up to 3 years, right?
Yeah.
So then you have to have the 1 year. And I would say I would always get it yourself, right? So whenever you can, you should have a plan to at least try to get it if it's possible, because who the heck knows what's gonna,
Happen in your business.
you don't really trust anybody, but in my opinion, you can only trust
Yep.
yourself.
Exactly.
But you also want to build reciprocity for when you sell it, right?
Yep.
So like, because that's going to add value to the sale for somebody else, right?
Yeah.
And not just having one person, having multiple people, right?
Yeah.
No key man
That
risk, right?
increases the multiple. That's why one of the questions we'll ask during the IC, which I'm going to talk to you guys about that too. One of the questions we asked during IC is who has the licenses, because obviously if there's multiple licenses, then the business is worth more, so the multiple should be a little bit higher. I'm actually sending you guys, for all you guys that don't have, there's a resource out there that has information on licensing in every state. I'm sending you guys that link through the chat box right now. You can go there. They should have information about licensing in every single state, so that you know ahead of time when you're looking at a business, kind of what the licensing requirements are, and you can assess it in relation to what you're looking at in terms of the business. So check out that site. One thing I wanted to talk about too, real quick. Oh, so we were in a leadership meeting and I wanted to bring this up as well. So any of you guys that are on this call that have done ICs and have not received that invite to a workshop, reach back out. I know Ty is trying to reach some of you, so make sure you reach back out to him and let him know if you have any interest from that standpoint. Now, the whole IC process, some of you know this, some of you don't. We kind of revamped it, and we're going to change the title of it to a deal review meeting, because that's what it really is at this point. It used to be that you would come on, you'd walk us through your deck, present the deal, and then at the end we'd ask questions. Well, actually, we'd ask questions along the way. And those meetings tended to be about an hour long. I thought it was kind of a waste of time for you to read through your deck when we can already read. I mean, I think we all graduated from at least high school. So I think we can all read. So it doesn't make sense for you guys to come in and read the deck and waste time doing that. So we've changed the process so that where you would submit your information, we'd review it beforehand, and then it's just more or less a 30-minute question and answer session about the deal. So we're going to kind of be changing a little bit of the wording and the training around deal review meetings, but also I want you guys to reach out to Chip. So you're going to have two options, because I know a lot of times my schedule is like jam-packed with other meetings and what have you. And I know some of you probably get a little frustrated that you can't get on with me. So Chip, who's not on the call today, was brought on to kind of facilitate some of that as well. So you'll be able to schedule meetings with either myself or him. So that should open up the calendar even more for you guys. Some calls I will be on with him. Others, he'll conduct on his own. Some I'll conduct on my own. Sometimes both of us will be there. But the idea is to kind of open that up for you guys. And we want you guys bringing deals to be reviewed and getting deals in front, offering on deals, and as many as you can do. We found that the more you do, the more likely you're going to be successful in actually finding a business. I mean, Jeffrey was one of those. He probably brought like 3 or 4 deals to us, even though this was like, well, did you bring 3 or 4 to us, Jeffrey? It was at least a couple, right? 2 or 3.
Yeah, I've done a few. I've done a
Yeah.
few, and
And
it's just coincidence. This was the first one.
yeah, yeah. And then he's now, he ended up closing on a business. And, we've got a few of you that have done Gloria, who's on the call. I mean, she brought in, she's probably done like 10 meetings, and, she's in the middle of closing on the business now as well. So, I mean, it's just, we want you guys bringing deals to us to review, okay, constantly. And it's not, I don't want you guys to think that you're ever bothering us. We like looking at them, which is primarily why I brought Chip on as a kind of almost like another analyst from that standpoint, because it can't just be me. I want someone else looking at these things, giving another opinion, and then also just being able to make sure we meet with as many of you guys as possible. Luther.
Hey, Rich. How's it going,
Hey, good. How are you?
man? Good. I still have this lingering question about the SBA loan, the Excel spreadsheet.
Okay.
Is this a good time to ask about that, or
Yeah,
give me
because
that?
James, I'm sure will be willing to jump in on this too.
Awesome, man. Yeah. So here's like a math problem that I'm struggling with in the SBA loan spreadsheet, right? So you put in all the expenses and everything in, right? And then it spits out initially here's what the business I guess the net operating income is, right?
Okay.
And then there's a line item for the general manager or the owner's compensation, and then it uses the net operating income plus the amount that's paid to the general manager or the owner to then say, okay, here's the total owner compensation, right? And I think my struggle, which I'm hoping one of you guys can help with, is like if when you calculate the owner's salary or the general manager's salary, why wouldn't that be considered part of the expenses? And as a result, whatever ends up in the net operating income is the total owner's compensation. Like why are we adding the GM or the owner's salary to the net operating income? Because that in itself is an expense to the business.
Yeah, so I personally don't like the way that's structured from that standpoint, but I understand why it's structured that way. The main reason that they added back after net operating income is for you to be able to see kind of what the total owner benefit is, in addition to kind of what your dividend payouts are or what have you. But it is a part of the net operating income. So, I mean, you could theoretically take that sheet and delete that line item if you weren't interested to see kind of how that's reflective there. Because your ultimate return is really going to be, if you're looking at it from an investment standpoint, is really going to be, that return on your investment, your initial investment plus the dividend stream. Now you are paying yourself along the way, which is part of the operating expense of the business. So I mean, it's really just kind of it's more or less about how you want to look at this, because that return of that salary that you're getting is kind of discretionary to a certain extent. Especially if it's not to a certain extent. It is totally discretionary if you have no other investors involved in the business. Typically, investors are going to set some rational level of expectation around your salary. But if you own the business outright, that is considered discretionary. So it is kind of really part of your cash flow, your return on, however you want to think about this, your return on cash. It's really a reflection of that. But if you've got like normal investors in the business, then it's not really a part of that. It should be really counted as just your return should just be considered as part of the return for the dividend stream that you're taking out of the business, along with your investors' dividend return. It shouldn't really be a part of that calculation. That's more or less for informational, from an informational standpoint than anything. But I mean, I don't, when I'm looking at a model, I just include the owner's salary as part of okay. when I'm looking at not from when I'm looking and I'm building my forecast from a model, I consider the owner's salary as just part of the normal operating expenses of the business. When you're first looking
Right.
at a deal, obviously you're gonna kind of pull out what that owner salary looks like and make sure that it's, you know, going forward, what that number will be. You'll pick it out to try to understand exactly what they're paying themselves and what the normalized number looks like going forward. But going forward, I just include it as part of the expenses, and I don't include it as part of my return on capital per se.
And
But
the banks will factor in your whatever salary you're going to pay yourself, right, into the debt service coverage.
yeah,
So they're gonna
which is part of
that's
the
going to be
expenses anyway. Yeah,
exactly. So it's like
yeah,
aside from just looking at your trying to see your total return, or on invested capital or what have you that's in the spreadsheet, the
yeah,
banks are going to force you to kind of factor in whatever you're going to pay yourself.
yeah.
And then you're only going to be able to get financed,
On that
assuming
piece.
all
Yeah,
of that makes sense
yeah,
anyways.
yeah. So that's
Got it.
that's just more or less there, yeah, for you to see kind of what your total return would look like, versus really it being a part of it, it's a part of net operating income.
Right, and that makes sense. Yes, I think what you're basically saying is like if I just need to make sure I don't double count, right? Like if I'm
Exactly.
including the owner's salary as an expense under salaries and wages, then I can't count it again in the line item that says, owner's salary or GM salary, right? Because then I will be double counting it. I either
Exactly.
include it. Yeah, I got you now. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
You really should add some kind of thing about taxes in that model. I modified the heck out of that sheet because it depends on your structure. I'm a C corp, so I have
Yeah.
corporate taxes to pay. So
So
that,
that does, yeah, it
with
makes
the
sense. Yeah.
it's mythical if you just use it as originally written. It's probably a lot better. I use an LBO model alongside that one, and then you can model your cash flow and leverage and tax estimate, estimated taxes and stuff to see what the value is going to look like at a potential exit.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot, like you said, a lot of it depends on your structure, what investors are involved in the business, whether you're S corp or C corp or LLC, because obviously S corps and generally LLCs, even though you can elect to be taxed as a corp, generally are going to be pass through entities, so there isn't tax at the entity level, at the corporate level, but there'll be, well, it's not a corporate if it's an LLC, I guess, but at the business level, but your individual taxes or whatever your rate is theoretically will affect your return, but that's kind of outside of the scope of looking at what the cash flow of the business looks like, except for like Jeffrey's saying, if you have a C corp, because there are going to be tax implications from that standpoint. So you might part of, and I've always kind of gone back and forth with internally with everyone on that model, is that yeah, it's a great model for looking at an opportunity on a simplified basis, but once you start getting into the complexities of it, once you kind of model it out, you're forecasting out kind of what your ultimate return should be, you should factor in state and federal level taxes estimates. And you're never going to be perfect on that because there's a whole lot of, you're going to have various states with various laws around deductions that you can take and that you can't take, federal, laws around what's deductible and what's not. But you can get to a approximation of what that tax is by just using some effective tax rate, and assuming that that's going to be your tax moving forward. And a lot of times you'll actually come in a lot better than that just because of those deductions that are allowed.
I wondered that same thing because especially with the Acquira fund, you have to do a C corp, right, to have the
Yeah.
different share types. And then the way that you would think that they would have that in that model. I remember running into that exact same problem.
Yeah.
And I made my own. I did the exact
Now
same
when
thing Jeff did. I
yeah.
kind of like modified my own.
Well, now when Chris looks at it, and when I'm discussing it with him internally, we have a different model that we use to factor in what that, what those potential taxes might look like. So yeah, I mean, we
Probably
just
just confuses people before they really need to know what they
yeah,
need. And
that's primarily why we don't do it in that particular model. Yeah,
and
it's just
it is variable, right,
yeah,
as well. And there's a lot of ways to obviously game it or what have you, you know, there's
Yep.
ways to play people that play that game. So
Yep,
makes
exactly.
sense.
All right.
Can I ask a follow-on question to
Sure.
that?
Sure.
And I know Rich, you and I sort of chatted about this week, but so C corps are required, if required, to invest because of the preferred shares. Is that correct?
Yep. Yep.
And then is there, as I guess as the owner, do we get the benefit of like the qualified small business stock exemption, or is that like, so this is like a new entity, right? Like that we would have together and then purchase the business. So theoretically, that qualified business stock should be available, I think. Do you know the answer to that
Yeah.
question? It might be an accountant question.
It's an accounting question, but it depends on too how you're investing. So theoretically, yes, if we're issuing, the new entity is issuing new stock, which it effectively it is, especially if we're involved, then yes, you will have the opportunity to qualify for the QSBL status upon sale. Now, obviously, there's some certain requirements you have to hit, but yes, you can. Now, then the question becomes, if you're investing, you as a buyer are investing into an entity that has already, I guess, taken advantage of that. That's where you want to talk to your CPA, because there's some rules around if someone's already taken that exemption, how long the business has been involved.
Gotcha.
Yeah, then you're going to have some different. There's some different rules around that, and that's where you want to talk to a CPA. But as a new entity, yes, you get that advantage. That clock starts ticking
Okay.
once you acquire the business. I think you got to hold it for what, 5 years or something like that.
Yeah.
And then it can't be more than, I don't know,
Thank
what,
you.
$10 million in assets or whatever. You know, I'm the worst accountant. Like, so a lot of these rules I never remember until I actually have to go back and look at them. I'd have
50
friends.
million in assets.
Yeah. I would have friends that
50
like,
million.
okay. Yeah, I would have friends like that, you know, that were kind of in the same class with me or that worked at an audit firm with me. They knew all this stuff like off the top of their head. And I'd be like, yeah, I remember reading that, but I'll have to go back. I tell our clients, I just have to go back and look at it again. But yeah, that sounds about right. I was
Yeah.
like,
I have a question, Rich.
Yep.
So when you're acquiring a business, right? So for like a stock sale, right? So I know you were kind of alluding there, if you're doing a stock sale, there's some ways that people have said where you can form a new entity that then buys the shares in the company, and then that can potentially qualify for the et cetera. Now,
Yep.
aside from that, my question really is, if you're buying a business that has like a ton of accumulated depreciation, right?
Mhm.
That the seller would be on the hook for if it wasn't a stock sale, right? Um, do you take that into account? Because like, are you just assuming that when you're buying that, are you putting like a discount on your price because of that? Because it's more beneficial to them? And then how do you look at that for when you go to exit, you just have to do a stock sale, so you're not the one that has to recapture those, you know,
Yeah.
accumulated
So a
depreciation, or
couple steps to that question. So conceptually, I would, if I wasn't going to get the benefit of redepreciating those assets. Okay, now this is very conceptual, so I don't want you guys to run with this and every deal you look at, you know, you just assume that you should do this. But conceptually, yeah, you're losing out on a benefit if you're not, if you want to do an asset purchase, but they want to do a stock sale and you agree to do a stock sale, you're losing out on that benefit if they have a lot of depreciable assets in the business, because those are that's a tax shield, right? So I would theoretically give that consideration when I'm forming my offer and use that as a lever to get a lower offer. Not necessarily, you may or may not get it. But I would definitely think about it from that standpoint. Um, Now, the other side of that is if you buy a business under a stock sale, remember, you don't get to redepreciate those assets. Uh, so those assets, then let's just say you own the business for a while, they're fully depreciated. Now, when you sell the business, you can theoretically sell it as a stock sale to another buyer. That other buyer may want to, if those assets are still, you know, now the thing is if they're fully depreciated, they've been around for like 20 years, maybe they're not even worth anything. Who knows? Or and then maybe they're not even operational. But let's just assume that they are. They're like forever assets. We'll just assume that. So when they buy the business, obviously they're going to want an asset purchase. Okay, so they're because it's in their incentive, it's in their, it's in their best interest to have one because now they can redepreciate those assets for whatever allocation we made to it during the purchase price. So whatever purchase price is there, whatever have been allocated to them, they can fully depreciate those assets again. So from that standpoint, at that point in time, you could basically ask for a premium. You could sell it as an asset sale. You're not going to really have any. You're not going to be on the hook for any depreciation recapture because, or not that much, because remember when you first purchased it, you were only allowed to take the depreciation from the point that they still had depreciation available. You had to continue on with what was already there. So most likely those have been kind of close to being fully depreciated anyway. So your basis in it, from that standpoint, isn't going to be high at all. So you get that benefit of it, but you also get the benefit of actually charging them a premium because now you know that they want to actually fully depreciate those things under an asset purchase. So there's some, there's some conceptual thinking around that. But
So
I think right.
And just correct me if I'm wrong as well. So the way I understand it, or the way that I've come to understand it, is that let's say the business has $2 million in accumulated depreciation, right? Like either whatever it is, right? When they sell it, if they did an asset sale, they would have to pay taxes on that $2 million. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Did they depreciated?
Well,
Well, it's not on the
depends
$2
what
million.
Or on the accumulated depreciation? No, it would be what's left on it at that point,
Yeah, so there's a calculation done based on
the
the
life of the.
there's a calculation basically. So when those purchase prices, that purchase price is allocated amongst those assets. So effectively, what ends up happening is they're gonna look at the basis, the original basis in the asset. Okay, there's been a certain amount of depreciation taken over the years. So let's just say, I don't know, we'll use $1,000 as the original cost. And let's just say they depreciated $900. So now their basis is $100 in that. So effectively, what will end up happening is if there's a purchase price allocated of just let's say $1,200 as opposed to, the $1,000 original cost, their basis is now going to be that $100. So they're going to pay the difference between the two. So that's the depreciation recapture part of it.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So I had it wrong. I thought that it was whatever the number was.
No.
And then that just continually added up until they sell.
Yeah.
And then you would have to pay on it. So that's not true.
Yeah.
It's based on the actual difference between your cost basis and your sale, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, because the depreciation effectively, they've been able to kind of shield taxes on basically they're basically taking depreciation as a expense line item over the years, and they've been able to kind of shield their taxes from that. But the idea is that, well, the other side of that is the government is going to get their piece. So the way they're going to do that is based on the amount depreciated, that's going to drive your basis down. So now they're going to create a situation where they're going to have to capture that number once they sell it. So if the purchase price allocated to it is much higher than that now depreciated base, that's what they're going to pay tax on.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. And so you would would you do that calculation in like due diligence if if there is a large, because I was looking at a deal and it literally was like $2 million accumulated depreciation. Would you be trying to figure out that number like
No,
How much is this guy gonna have to pay, and then like use that as like a
no,
lever?
I let the
Not even worth it.
accountants
You'd have
figure
to do
that
their
out.
taxes.
Yeah, they have
Right,
to do
yeah.
taxes. Yeah, I let the accountants deal with that. The only thing I would focus on is how many assets, or, how much in assets they have in the business and how much they have depreciated, just to get a sense of, do they have a lot of depreciable assets in the business? And would it make sense for me to buy this under an asset purchase where I can redepreciate these assets and then shield some of my income from that? I wouldn't do the detailed calculation. Let them figure that out. Let the accountants figure it out. And then if you actually decide to do that 338H10 election or whatever, both sides will have to agree to it anyway. And then both sides, professionals will have to come to an agreement on what that number looks like. Because both have to file a tax return. Both you and the seller would have to file basically the same tax return that agrees with the government from that standpoint. But yeah, I wouldn't spend my time worried about that specific calculation. Let the accountants do that. That's what they do.
Gotcha. Appreciate it.
For the 338H10, where does the like the asset allocation get decided? Like, is that usually in the disclosure schedules on a purchase agreement, or is that just on the like tax forms that you file and you just agree with the seller separately?
Yeah, I think most of the time it just happens on the tax form. You could do it within the purchase agreement on a disclosure document. I mean, if that's what everybody wanted to agree to, but both sides just basically, once you file it, that's basically the agreement. So if there's a situation, what I would do is make sure that both sides are in agreement, and make sure that the returns are filed exactly the same. Because what'll end up happening is, if you file one, they file the other, and it's different, the government could invalidate it, and force you guys to go back and renegotiate it, or basically treat it as one or the other. But the tax document itself is really the agreement.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Anyone else today? Well, look at that. We got through almost an entire hour. All right. Well, all of you guys have a happy new year, and I'll see you guys next week. Actually, I'm gonna have someone on next week one of our AEs who bought outside of home services, or something way outside of home services, but he wanted to come on and talk about it, and I think it's worthwhile. He was in the program for a while, and him and his partner found a business that was definitely out of out of home services, construction, professional trades, and it's a kind of a neat story. So I'm gonna have him on next week, just to kind of talk about his process and kind of what he went through, and from that standpoint, I think it'll be a worthwhile chat for you guys that are interested in businesses outside of this particular space. So, well, have a happy new year, and I will see you guys next week.